Imagine a chessboard where different players see the same pieces through entirely different lenses. To some, a knight represents noble protection. To others, it's a strategic threat. This perfectly captures the divided perspectives on Captain Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso. Most people see Traore as a liberator that is challenging the Western order, while most Western countries see him as a threat. To put this in context, US General Langley recently said that Traore is selling Burkina Faso's just to consolidate his power. But there's a lot more to this story. Following Langley's comments and the another coup attempt against Traore, many around the world have taken to the streets to show support for Captain Ibrahim Traore. But who is this man? What has he achieved so far? And most importantly, why are plotters trying to wipe him out? Since seizing power in September 2022, Traore has become one of West Africa's most polarizing figures. According to his supporters, Traore is shaking up the old system, and this has many worried. He is seen as a threat because of what he stands for. Taking out the man will not erase what he stands for, what he represents. He represents African sovereignty, freedom, prosperity, anti-imperialism, and anti-neocolonialism. If you know your African history, then you'll know that these are similar to Thomas Sankara, Kwame Nkrumah, Muammar Gaddafi, and Patrice Lumumba, champions of African sovereignty and anti-imperialism. However, others see Traore as simply another military leader who took power by force, potentially becoming what he claims to oppose. These contrasting views raise important questions that deserve examination. Is Traore truly carrying the torch of Pan-African sovereignty and anti-imperialism? Or is he, as critics suggest, another military leader destined to become Africa's next dictator? Do you think Ibrahim Traore is a dictator and an imposter deceiving Africans? Or is he genuinely fighting for his people's freedom and prosperity? Let me ask you something. What do you think of Ibrahim Traore? Is he a revolutionary or a dictator that has Africans fooled? To understand the debate surrounding Ibrahim Traore, we must first examine the historical context of Burkina Faso's leadership and the comparisons being made by various observers. Thomas Sankara governed Burkina Faso from 1983 to 1987, renaming the former French colony from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, meaning land of upright people. During his brief leadership, Sankara implemented policies that included land redistribution, mass vaccination campaigns, women's rights initiatives, anti-corruption measures, and notably, resistance to conditional foreign aid. In October 1987, Sankara was removed from power and terminated during a coup led by his former ally Blaise Compaoré, who subsequently ruled for 27 years. When Captain Traore took power in September 2022, at age 34, he stated his intention to address escalating security threats and what he described as the previous government's ineffectiveness. Some of his policy decisions have prompted comparisons to Sankara: restrictions on government officials' medical tourism, redirection of funding to domestic healthcare, financial support for university students, agricultural reform initiatives, resource nationalisation efforts, an emphasis on military self-reliance. Supporters of Traore point to these policies as evidence that he is rekindling Sankara's approach to governance. One demonstrator at a pro-Traore rally explicitly made this connection, stating, "What happened to Captain Sankara will not happen to Captain Traore. We will go all the way to defend our president." Critics, however, question whether the comparison is appropriate, noting significant differences in the international context and in how Traore came to power. Some argue that invoking Sankara's legacy serves primarily as a way to legitimise military rule rather than reflecting genuine ideological alignment. These divergent interpretations illustrate how historical comparisons themselves become contested terrain in evaluating current leadership, with each side drawing different conclusions from the same historical references. Traore's leadership has generated sharply divided reactions, both within Africa and internationally, revealing complex attitudes toward governance, sovereignty, and foreign influence in the region. Public demonstrations in Burkina Faso illustrate this division. Just a few days ago, thousands gathered in Ouagadougou to rally behind Traore following an alleged coup attempt and after critical comments from US General Michael Langley, head of US Africa Command. During a Senate testimony in early April 2025, General Langley accused Traore of using Burkina Faso's gold reserves just to protect the junta regime, rather than benefiting the population. These demonstrators viewed such comments as foreign interference in Burkina Faso's affairs. During these demonstrations, various perspectives emerged. Burkinabe musician OTB Joan expressed skepticism toward foreign criticism, stating, "Burkina Faso is not against anyone, but we will no longer tolerate looting. The general is a liar." This sentiment reflects a viewpoint that prioritizes national resource control over international relations. The support for Traore has crossed borders and continents. Last week, rallies supporting Traore occurred not only across Africa, but in countries like Jamaica, Barbados, and the United States. In Montego Bay, Jamaica, a group of Rastafarians gathered to publicly express solidarity with Traore, describing him as a symbol of resistance against neo-colonialism. South Africa's economic freedom fighters leader Julius Malema has strongly endorsed Traore, framing him as embodying the awakening of a generation of African leadership focused on sovereignty. However, other African voices have taken contrary positions. Kenyan Senator Aaron Cheruiyot has criticised Traore, describing him as a coup leader who is trying to destroy Burkina Faso. This highlights significant disagreement among African political figures about Traore's legitimacy and impact. International organisations have also expressed concerns. ECOWAS has taken a position against the military governments in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, calling for returns to constitutional rule. In response, these three nations formed their own bloc, the Alliance of Sahel States, further polarizing regional politics. If this analysis has stirred something in you, even just a little, take a moment to engage with these complex realities. Hit that like button to support balanced coverage of African politics. Subscribe to the New Tourist channel if you believe multiple perspectives deserve to be heard, not reduced to simplistic narratives. And consider sharing this video with others interested in understanding the nuanced dynamics of sovereignty and leadership in Africa today. Whether you support or question Traore's approach, thoughtful engagement with these issues matters. The future of nations like Burkina Faso depends on informed global citizens willing to look beyond headlines. Now, these conflicting viewpoints raise several questions. What factors influence how different groups perceive Traore? Do domestic supporters and international allies have aligned or divergent interests? How do historical experiences with colonialism and foreign intervention shape current attitudes toward military leadership? Burkina Faso's gold reserves have become a central point of contention in discussions about Traore's governance and the country's international relationships. Just weeks after Langley's comments about Traore in early April, Burkina Faso's government granted an industrial mining license to Russian company Nordgold for the new gold project in the Ouagadougou province. According to official government information, this mine is projected to yield approximately 20.22 metric tons of gold over 8 years and contribute over $89 million to the state budget. Under the agreement, Gilby Burkina will hold 85% of the project, while the Burkinabe government retains 15% without financial contribution. This mining agreement represents one aspect of Burkina Faso's changing international alignments. Under Traore's leadership, the country has established closer economic ties with Russia, while reducing relationships with traditional Western partners. Other resource-related policies have included approval for constructing Burkina Faso's first domestic gold refinery in November 2023, suspension of export permits for small-scale private gold production in February 2024, renegotiation of mining contracts with foreign corporations, investments in local processing of agricultural products, including tomatoes and cotton, continues to generate fundamentally different interpretations among observers of Burkina Faso's political landscape. But why are people criticising Traore? Those who view Traore positively point to several policy directions his government has taken. They highlight resource nationalisation efforts, investments in domestic industry, rejection of certain types of foreign aid, and decisions that appear to prioritise national interests. Some supporters mention his personal choices, such as reports that he continues to live on his military salary rather than significantly increasing his compensation. These observers present Traore as offering an alternative governance model focused on national sovereignty. Critics focus on different aspects of Traore's leadership. They emphasise concerns about democratic governance and the military nature of his government. These observers note that Traore came to power through a coup rather than democratic elections, and question whether claimed coup attempts against his government might serve as justification for consolidating power. Some invoke historical examples like Zimbabwe's Robert Mugabe, who received initial praise as a liberator but later faced widespread criticism for authoritarian governance over decades. These competing assessments reflect broader debates about governance in post-colonial contexts. Different observers prioritise different metrics of successful leadership. Is democratic procedure more important than economic independence? Does stability matter more than political representation? Can externally defined governance standards adequately account for specific national circumstances and historical contexts? Historical patterns suggest that leadership assessments often shift over time, as initial policies produce longer-term outcomes and as leaders respond to various pressures and challenges. The ultimate judgment of Traore's leadership will likely depend not just on his current actions, but on how governance in Burkina Faso evolves over years to come. But Burkina Faso's current political situation exists within a complex web of international relationships and competing global interests that extend far beyond its borders. In January 2023, the Traore government terminated a 2018 defence agreement with France and requested that French troops leave the country within 1 month. This decision followed public demonstrations in Ouagadougou, where participants called for the departure of French forces after approximately a decade of military presence that had not resolved the ongoing security challenges from armed groups. By February 2023, French forces had withdrawn from Burkina Faso, concluding Operation Sabre. This policy shift coincided with broader regional realignments. Burkina Faso, along with Mali and Niger, all currently under military leadership, formed the Alliance of Sahel States. This new regional grouping represented a move away from the ECOWAS and traditional Western partnerships toward alternative international relationships, particularly with Russia. Different perspectives exist on these changing international alignments. Some analysts view Russia's growing presence in the Sahel as offering these countries alternatives to Western partnerships that often come with conditions related to governance and economic policies. From this perspective, Russia's approach of providing military support and trade relationships without explicit governance requirements appears to some as respecting national sovereignty. Other observers express concern that these new relationships may create different forms of dependency rather than true independence. They question whether moving from Western influence to Russian influence represents genuine autonomy or simply a change in external partners. Security concerns have also intensified during this period of geopolitical transition. Just last month, Burkina Faso's government announced that it had prevented what it described as a major plot to overthrow Traore. According to Security Minister Mahamadou Sana, this alleged coup attempt involved current and former soldiers, with connections to individuals in neighbouring Ivory Coast. The allegations that coup plotters were based in neighbouring Ivory Coast have introduced a new dimension to regional relations. Security Minister Mahamadou Sana's public statement that the brains outside the country are all located in Ivory Coast marks a significant diplomatic flashpoint between the two nations. Ivory Coast remains a key ECOWAS member, creating a formal institutional separation between these neighbouring countries. The divergent political alignments complicate potential resolution mechanisms. Without shared regional membership, traditional ECOWAS diplomatic channels for addressing cross-border tensions are no longer available. Some analysts suggest this institutional gap could amplify security challenges along the 580-kilometre shared border. Economic implications also warrant consideration. Ivory Coast serves as a crucial access route to seaports for landlocked Burkina Faso, with significant trade flowing between the countries. Deteriorating diplomatic relations could affect these vital economic connections, potentially impacting supply chains, market access, and living costs for citizens in both nations. Meanwhile, US military activity has continued in the region. The annual USAFRICOM Operation Flintlock was based in Ivory Coast this year, with Commander Langley participating in its opening activities. These developments reflect how politics in the Sahel region increasingly intersects with broader international competitions between global powers, with each external actor pursuing its own strategic objectives while framing involvement in different terms. Burkina Faso faces significant ongoing challenges, regardless of how one evaluates its current leadership. Security threats from armed groups continue to affect substantial portions of national territory. Economic development faces obstacles not only from these security concerns, but also from structural limitations in infrastructure, education, and healthcare. Any government would struggle with these interconnected challenges that have deep historical roots. The outcomes of Traore's leadership will likely depend on several factors that remain uncertain. Will the resource management policies implemented under his government primarily benefit the broader population or more limited groups? Can new international partnerships deliver tangible improvements in security and economic development? How will the government respond to both external pressures and internal demands for accountability and inclusion? The alliance of Sahel states formed by Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger represents an experiment with alternative regional arrangements outside traditional structures. Different observers will assess this initiative based on different criteria, some prioritizing procedural democracy, others economic outcomes, and still others regional autonomy and sovereignty. Some analysts suggest that current debates about African leadership continue to reference historical figures like Sankara, Nkrumah, Gaddafi, and Lumumba, because fundamental questions about post-colonial governance and development remain unresolved. The relationship between political independence and economic sovereignty, between procedural democracy and substantive representation, between international integration and national autonomy. These tensions continue to shape political discourse across the continent. For Traore personally, the path forward requires navigating treacherous waters. History shows that leaders who challenge established international economic orders often face intense pressure, both external and internal. His ability to maintain popular support while resisting both foreign interference and the corrupting influences of power will determine whether he becomes a transformative figure like Sankara or follows a different trajectory. Different observers will inevitably reach different conclusions about Traore based on their own priorities, perspectives, and interpretations of evidence. What some see as necessary assertion of sovereignty, others view as concerning authoritarianism. What some present as economic nationalism, others interpret as resource capture. These competing narratives reflect not just differing assessments of the same facts, but different frameworks for determining what constitutes successful governance. Time will ultimately reveal which assessments prove most accurate as Burkina Faso's path forward unfolds in the coming years. This isn't just a story about leadership in Burkina Faso, it's about the complex dynamics shaping nations across Africa. Questions of governance models, resource management, security approaches, and development pathways that diverse stakeholders view through different lenses. Let me ask you this again. What do you think of Ibrahim Traore? Is he a revolutionary or a dictator that has Africans fooled? If watching this sparks something in you, curiosity, reflection, perhaps even a desire to understand more deeply, don't let that feeling disappear. Subscribe to The New Tourist right now because we'll continue bringing you content that explores multiple perspectives on important global developments. Like this video, so algorithms don't bury nuanced analysis that presents different viewpoints without telling you what to think. Share it with your family, your friends, and your social circles. Be the catalyst for conversations that acknowledge complexity rather than reducing it to easy answers. And if you want to go even deeper, if you want behind-the-scenes insights, early access, and exclusive discussions about these nuanced topics, join our membership community. Because this isn't just a channel anymore. It's a space for engaging with our multifaceted world and the exploration of diverse perspectives on governance, resources, security, and development. It's only just beginning.